All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started today with our 1 o'clock webinar on 10 tips to becoming more secure in 2017. My name is Jeff Yeagley with Compass IT Compliance. I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to jump on for today's webinar. Before we go ahead and get started with the presentation, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Common things that we come across, just want to kind of set some expectations at the beginning. Everyone's line has been muted to reduce or eliminate any type of background noise, so it's not distracting for Austin when he's going through the presentation. With that, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you have some questions, there's a chat feature inside of the webinar. You can go ahead and pop those questions right in there. You can address them to either myself, again, my name is Jeff Yeagley, Jeff with a G, by the way, or you can address them to everybody and we can answer those at the end. Second thing is we will be sending a copy of the presentation out to everybody who attended and or registered for the event. So you'll receive that later this afternoon. This will also be posted on our website. So if it's more convenient or if you inadvertently delete the email or intentionally delete the email for that matter, you can go to our website and grab a copy if you so choose. And the last thing is we are recording the webinar. So that will also be available in that same email that I send out will be a link to go ahead and view the recording of the webinar. Or again, you can go to our website and grab a copy off of there or grab a viewing off there as well as our YouTube channel. So I know that's a lot of information. I apologize, but those are the most common questions that we get at the beginning of these webinars. So just wanted to cover those. So transitioning in here, I'm just going to introduce the topic and our presenter for today. Today we're going to talk about 10 tips for becoming more secure in 2017. This is a great topic. If you read the news or turn on the TV or whatever the case might be, you hear about different breaches that are taking place, whether it's intercontinental hotels, which just upped their breach tally from a couple dozen to 1,200 different locations, to different phishing schemes or scams that might be going on, particularly around tax time. So these are 10 great tips that you can go ahead and introduce into your organization to have an immediate impact in mitigating your overall risk. Today's presenter, I'm looking really forward to this. I hope I'm not putting them on the spot too much here, but is Austin Wolfson from Compass IT Compliance. Austin's one of our senior IT security analysts with Compass, does a lot of work, obviously, with our clients to assist with penetration testing and vulnerability scanning and mitigating their risks, but there's a lot of back-end development stuff for Compass as well. So super knowledgeable guy, and I'm really looking forward to him sharing these tips with you guys. So without further ado, I will quiet down and I will turn it over to Austin to go ahead and start the presentation. Take it away, Austin.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, guys. Like you said, my name is Austin. I'm a security analyst at Compass IT Compliance. So the webinar is going to be roughly between 25 and 30 minutes. Again, I just wanted to thank all of you guys for coming out and being part of today's webinar. I understand that everyone's lives are extremely busy, and the fact that you're here just proves that you care about security and you care about your organization's security. So yeah, let's get right into it. This webinar will be primarily targeted towards the IT department organization era of a company. But if you're not in IT and you're not all that technical, that's okay. A lot of these tips can be implemented into other parts of the departments and organizations in your company. So just read along, and if you have any questions, there's a Q&A session afterwards. So what are the top 10 tips? These are what we're going to be talking about and discussing today. What are those top 10 tips? Why are those top 10 tips important in your company? And then how can I actually implement them into my organization to make my company more secure? Again, after there'll be a Q&A session. Next. So let's get right into it. Know your environment, right? In order to secure your environment, you really need to understand where your most vulnerable points are. And in order to do that, we need to really understand a lot about our environment. One thing we can do is know what kind of assets are on our network. How many clients, how many servers, how many pieces of hardware that reside on our infrastructure. If we know this, we can easily generate audit trails to monitor and prevent unauthorized entry of an unknown device. And we can do this pretty easily just by creating an inventory of all the equipment and then who is actually responsible for it. This will overall mitigate that risk. Also, know your onboarding process, right? I mean, unfortunately, people have to be let go, and sometimes that creates disgruntled employees. And disgruntled employees are a huge threat to companies, especially if they had the keys to the IT kingdom, they have access to third-party applications that are used in production, or have access to a production server. So we want to make sure that we have a proper policy in place to ensure that user accounts don't get forgotten, and then when terminating an employee, these are disabled. On the contrary, though, a new hire is also potentially a threat to a company, right? Most new hires won't do this, but we all know the employee that might try and get into something he's not supposed to. So we just want to make sure that we give employees the correct permissions that they need, but not necessarily the permissions that they want. Be conscious of people's roles in your organization. To be really security aware in your organization requires you to understand what people need on a day-to-day basis. So we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of what people need to get their jobs done correctly. Also, if your company doesn't have or enforce a group policy on end clients, group policy is created by Active Directory to kind of weigh in on what employees can or can't do on the network. It is vital that third-party applications are screened prior to installing, because if they aren't screened, then you're opening an invitation for unwanted security threats. So if you don't have a process, make sure you put one in place, at least so downloads have to be approved by a manager. Last but not least, social engineering threats. Social engineering threats are a huge threat to companies, and while it is impossible to fully mitigate social engineering, awareness is really the tool that must be used if you want to control it. Let people know that it's a year-round effort and that the company that they work for is really only as secure as the employees make it, right? And some examples of social engineering include keeping your computer unlocked when you go to the bathroom, or talking about that sensitive information when you go to Starbucks across the street with a coworker, or throwing away sensitive information in the trash and not the shredder. We just need to be mindful of this kind of stuff. Next slide. So tip 2, be preemptive. To be preemptive really means to be able to foresee an issue before it actually becomes one. So make sure that programs, operating systems, and firmware are up to date and checked regularly. You see, when these kind of programs go out of date, it allows attackers to be able to penetrate that program more easily. And the reason for this is pretty simple. Time is a hacker's best friend. So the majority of the updates that are thrown on these operating systems and firmware are to fix known vulnerabilities. So when you don't actually update in a timely fashion, you're giving the attacker time to create an exploit so he can actually successfully penetrate that system. For web and production servers, this can be a really difficult task, especially because a lot of times developers write code for specific versions of Python, for instance, or Ruby. So in order to mitigate that risk, what we really want to do is update your servers in a sandbox environment, try it against your production code and see if it works. If it doesn't work, fix it, make sure it works, and then push to your live production servers. So to make sure that your organization is secure, an insightful understanding of your company's infrastructure is needed. One thing that you can do is, memorize that network infrastructure and that architecture map. And this is a great tool, especially when you have your IT staff all on board. If all of your IT staff has this network topology memorized, it really helps, because I know that I've created an architecture and I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. I talk to my friend, were reviewing it, and he said, well, why did you do this? And I was like, you know what? I don't know why I did that. So just talking through the decisions that you make when you create your infrastructure really shows your vulnerable points. So we want to get that across, that everyone on your IT staff, plays a part in creating a secure infrastructure. Touch and monitor all assets in your infrastructure. Being able to touch and monitor these allows IT groups to successfully install updates and also scan devices for issues. So we're going to want to be able to do this, so it ensures that users connecting internally or via VPN are secure when connecting to our infrastructure. Last but not least for this tip, ensure entrances to buildings have appropriate security. Make sure that all exits have RFID sensors, and if you have security personnel, make sure that they're actually doing their job. But in most cases, it's not the RFID tags or the security personnel where the breach is. It's when an employee decides to go and have a smoke, during break, and props the door open so they can get back into the building more easily. And that is a huge issue. Just because this happens, what's the point of having those RFID tags if a door is already open? You know what I mean? And it's a single point of failure, and it really needs to be addressed. Next slide. Tip number 3, always be passive. So being passive is the quickest way to determine if your organization is really secure or not. So to monitor and sift through large amounts of log files is a huge and daunting task. However, to really understand your infrastructure and your servers and what's going on fully, it's really a necessity, right? So applications are out there that are awesome for this, right? They grab all of your log data and they dump it into easy to read graphs for analysis. And this is huge because instead of having an IT team that is full-time looking at logs trying to find issues, you dump it into this third-party application. It shows you a graph, and you have easy to read knowledge of what's going on. And then if someone on your C-level execs are wondering what's going on too, it's easy enough for them to read also. Ensure appropriate personnel are notified about security issues. This is a really interesting one. Something as easy as an organizational chart can really save the company a lot of time and a lot of money. I was at a company a few years ago, and I was an entry-level employee, and there was an issue in our production server, and my immediate manager went on vacation, and I didn't actually know who his manager was. So I had to scrounge and I had to ask around to see hey, my boss isn't here. Who do I have to tell in order to get this done and get this fixed right away? So something as easy as an organizational chart can really help your company be more secure and more passive and overall more efficient. Run routine scans on end clients. Vulnerability scanners are a great tool to determine if vulnerabilities are present due to hosts not getting operating system updates or firmware updates. Running these vulnerability scanners on a day-to-day or on a weekly schedule is huge and can really, it will show you how your infrastructure is doing, and it can save you a lot of time and effort in the long run. Next tip. Tip 4, don't get discouraged. Threats are inevitable. They're gonna happen. So what you really need to do is figure out what you do once you get a threat. I mean, it's what you do with these threats that are important. So in-house policies are created for instances such as these. While each scenario is actually different, in-house policies really ensure that employees are responsible for their actions, right? So they're a way for the employer to write and create specific guidelines in case something happens. So if your company does not have a set of policies and procedures, especially if you are binded by a specific industry regulation or framework, it's crucial that you obtain them for this reason. Prioritize vulnerabilities. When a penetration test or vulnerability assessment occurs, more likely than not, you will find your network having vulnerabilities. So if you are already being preemptive, which was tip 2, or passive, which was tip 3, then the result of these tests shouldn't come as a surprise to you. But if they do, you're going to come back with vulnerabilities, and it's really important to prioritize and remediate these vulnerabilities effectively. Vulnerability scans output vulnerabilities by criticality, and you need to do the same if you get into this position, right? So all critical vulnerabilities should be attempted to be remediated and resolved within 90 days. And then just make sure that you log all of your changes. So this isn't just so you can have an audit trail. It's if you update and and you have to revert back. You know what changes you've made, and overall, it's a fail-safe in case you have to revert back. Next slide. Tip number 5: ensure that you are industry compliant. Not being compliant in your industry can really be the difference between your company staying in business or ultimately closing its doors. So companies spend massive amounts of money to ensure that this exact scenario doesn't happen to them. But with that being said, when an industry standard updates their regulation and their frameworks, companies are given a set amount of time to amend these changes. So we need to make sure as a company that we frequently research and we know about these changes as soon as they happen. For industries that require a yearly audit, such as PCI, make sure that you're ready for it. Most likely, unless there was a huge drastic change in your industry standards, the auditor will be asking similar, if not the exact same questions as last year. So to speed up the process on both sides, have this information readily available, and this will ensure that no deadlines are missed, especially if the audit happens close to the deadline date. If you find that your company has fallen behind on standards, that's okay too. You just need to make sure that you put a timeline and create a timeline and put it in place and prioritize these tasks to get them back on track. Next slide. Tip 6, ensure third-party applications are legitimate. So this is pretty interesting because third-party applications they make companies work so much more efficiently. And you can basically buy or you can open source an application for basically anything you need in a company, right? But with this, a multitude of vulnerabilities and security threats arise, right? And with hosted providers, there's always risk involved. So unless you purchase the application, you isolate it from the external web, and you have total control of the server that it actually resides on, you always kind of have to be worried that the company that you're purchasing it from took precautionary actions to ensure that your information is secure. So to prevent this, before acquiring a new third-party software, assess your current situation and actually define why you think you need it, right? I mean, once you have this definition, talk amongst your team members and determine if it is in fact the correct way forward purchasing this third-party application. So let's fast forward a little bit, right? The application's been purchased. So now what do we do? Well, you know what? Have a scanner search for security vulnerabilities on your new software. Whether you plan on using an antivirus tool to test for hidden malicious code or just a full-blown web application scanner, preventative screening will help you stay secure. And MD5 hashes are often readily available to cross-reference on a download, especially if the application is free. And for people who don't know what an MD5 hash is, it's a hash. It's a set of numbers and characters that represent the file as a string, right? So when you download it, if you did an MD5 hash, it should be exactly the same hash as what the vendor is saying it is. If it is not, then that means two things. One, someone altered the program, which is bad, don't install it. Or number two, when you downloaded it onto your laptop or your client, something went wrong and you need to re-download. Once you've chosen an application to use, make sure that you understand that updating this software should be tracked. It should be in your inventory, just like all the rest of your assets. Just like any other software that resides on your infrastructure, if you leave this application out of date, it's not best practice, and you're setting yourself up for more security threats. So keeping track of this will mitigate this risk. Next slide. Tip number 7, establish good coding practice. So if you're a tech company and you're on with us today, nothing should be a surprise in this tip, right? Establish good coding practice. It's way easier said than done. And while most of this process isn't really security related, everything plays a small piece to ensure that no piece gets missed, right? So when dev teams have multiple people working on a single project, it's imperative that everyone is in sync to ensure that the software releases correctly and efficiently. So versioning control was introduced, and versioning control allows team members to work on the same project and not step on each other's toes by allowing team members to branch off on a base set of files. So once the dev writes his code and the code is complete, QA'd, and tested, they can merge their changes back into this base set of files, and then other devs can start working on his set of files. So this is the basis of versioning control. If you're interested and you're not using it, I highly recommend it. There's a bunch of tutorials online which are awesome. But to mitigate programming vulnerabilities, right, code reviews are important. And while this part of the process also ensures that developers don't accidentally crash production with a wrong variable, when using programming utilities such as lint, this process can also flag suspicious code usage in software that can cause bugs or give attackers leverage to access your system. These utilities force best practice in the respective coding language and can be easily be protective of you of a catastrophic vulnerability error. So if you're not using something such as lint to force best practice in your coding, I recommend you do so. Before your code heads into production, run it through a code analyzer. There's a bunch online that you can purchase. Code analyzers check your code for security violations without actually executing your code. And this allows for security members to be preemptive, which was tip 2. And it also ensures that the application is as secure as it can be prior to letting the general public access it. Next slide. Tip 8, protect client information at all costs. If you don't protect your client's information, eventually you're going to lose your client, right? So the number one thing is ensure that a data classification policy is in place. And more importantly, we need to make sure that all of our employees in our company understand what this classification policy is in place for, right? I mean, they need to know the difference between what public information is, what confidential and sensitive information is, and what is restricted. If we can define these clearly in a policy and then have every employee truly understand what that means, we are going to protect our client and we're going to protect our company. Also, vulnerability scans and penetration tests need to be conducted, and they need to be conducted regularly. If you're set by a security standard such as PCI, you're required to have an internal and an external penetration test at least yearly, right? But you should also be doing vulnerability scans and penetration tests whenever you have a major environmental change in your infrastructure. This helps you realize if, in fact, the changes that you've made have made your infrastructure more vulnerable to break-ins, right? So you wanna do this regularly, and it really will give you a great picture of how secure your infrastructure is. Also, require all remote employees to use VPN to access internal information. This is huge. I work remote a lot of the time, and I love going to Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks and just hanging out there all day and doing work, but so does everyone else, right? And you don't know who else is in that coffee shop. So you might have an attacker creating a man-in-the-middle attack trying to steal all of that information. And this can be easily resolved if you just use the VPN, okay? So if you have access to a VPN, make sure that you use it, especially if you're using internal information or client information. Next slide. Tip number 9, protect from viruses. So tip number 2 is being preemptive. If you were doing that, you're already on the right track. I mean, if you make sure that your operating system and your firmware and all your programs are up to date, you have your policy and procedures in place and you abide by them, you're doing a great job. But there are a few things that you have to be aware of. And as Jeff said in the beginning, phishing attacks are huge now. I mean, whenever I look at my personal email, I can tell you on a day-to-day basis that I see phishing attacks in there. And as long as awareness is key to preventing you from accidentally selecting a phishing attack email. One, make sure that if you do open it and you read it, that it actually makes sense. A lot of these guys are from another country and they use Google Translator to translate to English and it doesn't even make sense, right? Number 2, make sure that the URL is legitimate. If let's say it's Bank of America. If Bank of America is saying that there's a change in your account and you have to sign in, make sure that URL matches Bank of America's URL. If it doesn't, don't click it. That's a bad thing. Last but not least, if you have a phishing attack and it's from one of your best friends that says that, hey, I have free Tooth Fighter tickets for Friday night, make sure that you text him and see if that's actually a legitimate request, right? Hey, did you send me this? Yes or no? No? Okay, then that's an issue and I should report it. Back up your computer on a regular basis. If you back up your computer, it needs to be encrypted. But this is a great restore point. Like I said, vulnerabilities get in and it happens, right? Computers blue screen all the time. Not as much as they used to, but that's a different story. This backing up of your computer and encrypting it will allow you to start,
Austin, are you there, buddy? Did we lose you? I think we might have lost Austin here, but I think he'll join us back in here for a minute. So I apologize, folks, for the intermission, we'll call this, kind of like halftime if you're a football fan or a basketball fan, or in between periods if you're in the hockey playoffs right now. So apologize for the delay here, but just to kind of cover some of the pieces that Austin has already hit on, and these are all just great tips. And when we get to the end, I try and kind of wrap things up and talk about maybe a couple pieces within the webinar that I think are kind of really stand out and are the most important, if you will. And in this one, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that because these are all just such great tips, because honestly what it comes down to, a lot of this stuff, as Austin kind of alluded to at the beginning, is even if you're not in IT, a lot of this stuff just comes down to common sense, particularly when we talk about those phishing emails and malware attacks and whatnot. Gone are the days where folks are sending these ones that I'm sure you've all gotten the Nigerian relative or the Nigerian prince. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, but now these are getting more creative. So I'll give a shameless plug to our blog here. When we get these types of emails, we don't post all of them, but we post a good amount of them, because the more information that we can share with everybody out there, the better the chances of stopping these types of attacks. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if these attacks stop, these bad actors, hackers, whatever you want to call them, will stop doing them. They only do it and continue to do it and grow doing it because it works. So again, sorry for that shameless plug there, but I would say, and we've done a number of webinars on this topic, that these types of attacks, phishing attacks, are the most damaging ones that organizations see. Number one, because they can happen so quickly that before you even really recognize what's happening, it could be too late. Number two, the recovery is so time consuming. We had a client that was a law firm that went through a ransomware attack that ultimately ended up costing them $40,000 out of pocket, and that didn't include the IT department spending 24 hours a day for several days recovering from that attack. But it also shut them down in terms of their client billing and being able to track billable hours for 2 or 3 days. So those are types of things that can have a lasting impact on an organization. Recent statistics just came out that said that 1 in 5 businesses that suffers a ransomware attack ultimately ends up going out of business. So that's 20%. So that's a scary number to think about for sure. Hey, Austin, you're back, man. We had a little halftime show. So.
Sorry about that. Just
no worries.
Cut out on me.
I was trying to fill for you as best I could, so I'm going to turn it back over to you so people don't have to listen to me anymore.
Are you guys still on tip 9?
We're still there, yep.
Okay. All right. So sorry about that, everyone. Back up your computer. Make sure that if you back it up, it's encrypted. It becomes a great restore point for you. Last but not least, GPOs, right? Group policies, they're on Active Directory, but what ends up happening is it allows you to enforce strong policies, right? Strong passwords. Make sure that you restrict downloads and pop-up blockers are enabled. Overall, this will help you and protect you from viruses. Next slide. Last but not least, I've said it throughout this whole webinar, is awareness is key, right? Your company's only as secure as everyone is in your company, right? So if you have one employee that doesn't truly understand what security means and represents in an organization, then your company isn't secure. So we just need to make sure that they are aware that they need to make sure that their computers are up to date. They need to make sure they have strong passwords. They need to understand what social engineering are and is. They need to understand that policies and procedures that are put in place by your company and organization are there for a reason, and it's there to protect them as an employee and also that as a company. Next slide. So these are the top 10 tips all in one slide. Know your environment. Really, this is huge. If you know your environment inside and out, you're doing great, and you can truly protect your company from issues. You know what? And vulnerabilities are they're inevitable, right? So don't get discouraged. Like if it happens, just make sure that you have a nice timeline set in place to remediate those vulnerabilities and make sure that you have a good log and audit trail of that, right? And then protect client information and protect it at all costs. Understand that the company is giving you a responsibility when you're using and you're working on a client, right? Just make sure that you do your due diligence and keep their information safe. Protect from viruses. I just talked about that, right? So just make sure that you back up your computer, you use strong passwords, and you use antivirus nightly or weekly to ensure that you're secure. Again, if you enjoyed this webinar, my name is Austin Wolfson. I'm a security analyst. I'm so sorry that I got kicked off, but if you have any questions at all, here's my email. Feel free to email me anytime. The company website is www.compassitc.com, and that's the end of my webinar. Do we have any questions?
Awesome job, man. Thank you so much. So, folks, just want to kind of touch base on a couple pieces here, and while we had a little brief intermission, I did say that there was one tip where I usually have a tough time, or I'm able to recap some of the key pieces that come out of webinars, and that this one would be tough, and of course it is tough. However, at the same token, I think the last one that Austin shared with us in terms of awareness is key is so critically important. I don't know if you guys have seen the cartoon. We have a tough time using it because it's not ours. We didn't create it. But it's if I can set up a visual for you here, it's a gentleman in a boxing ring, and on the other side of the boxing ring is a stack of all computer gear, routers, switches, computers, laptops, etc. And it says, In this corner, we have, all of your information security pieces, firewalls, et cetera, antivirus, anti-malware. And in this corner, we have Dave. And that's really kind of sums everything up, because this is a constant battle. Your employees, 100%, are your weakest link, no matter what area of the organization they might be in. You can have the greatest technology in the world, but if it's not configured properly, or if you go ahead and click on a link that's in a phishing email, you bypass all of that hard work and all of that great technology that's in place. So awareness is key. We've done webinars on this topic as well. Don't do it just to check a compliance box or just to meet a compliance requirement on a yearly basis. Make it ongoing, make it fun if you can. And I know that's probably kind of a little bit an oxymoron there in talking about security awareness training or awareness being fun, but it really is true. So I think that's probably the greatest point here. So if there's any additional questions, we do have 3 questions here that we'll go through, but if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to please pop them into the chat box here. So the first question that we will go to is, in regards to VPN, are there any ways to make that connection more secure? It's a great question, actually.
Yeah, so that is a really good question. So for people who don't really understand VPN basically just allows a user to access their internal infrastructure from an external point, right? And you usually log into a VPN with a password. The password is usually static, just like usual all passwords are, right? They change every 90 days or whatever. But there is a way, it's called dual authentication. And what that allows you to do is you can purchase these codes. Google Authenticator has them, and it's a code that changes every 30 seconds. So what you can do is you put your regular password in, and then you add the code before or after the password, depending on what kind of VPN you use. And this exponentially makes your password more complex. The reason being is that the code changes every 30 seconds, and it's basically impossible for an attacker to guess your password.
Awesome. Great point. Question number 2. What can I do if I see a security threat, especially if it is a recurring employee error? Another good question.
Yeah, sure. So I think that this is kind of a touchy subject. I think that the issue doesn't really happen. I think that everyone knows when something's off, right? I mean, everyone knows that they shouldn't prop the door open to your building, but people do it anyway because they're like, oh, no one will say anything. And that's the main issue, right? So what you need to do is, if you're best friends with the person who is making your company vulnerable by doing a security threat such as that, let them know, like, hey, like, that's not a good idea. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, send an anonymous tip to your manager and say, like, hey, I think that this needs to be addressed. I don't want to be in the spotlight because, I like him as a person. He's just doing this wrong. And, I'm looking out in the company's best interest. Another thing that we're implementing actually at Compass is like an anonymous tip jar. So if someone does do something wrong, you put it in the tip jar, it gets to the right people, and that kind of stuff can be addressed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good stuff. That's really, really good stuff. And I think it's always a challenge because people naturally kind of gravitate towards that path of least resistance, right? Like propping open the door, just being helpful in general. So if somebody's coming in behind you, hey, can you hold the door for me? I forgot my ID. People aren't saying, you know what, I think I'm going to go out there, I'm going to drink my coffee in the beautiful springtime weather, and I'm going to make sure I prop that door open for a security breach. So I don't think there's any ill intent behind these things, but I think that's a great solution or possible solutions. That's awesome. Good stuff for sure. So this third one is a kind of a scenario question. And I think that you prompted it, Austin. So this is going to be awesome since we know that you like to go to Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. So the question is, when in a place like Starbucks, if you use your iPhone or Android as a hotspot, is it secure?
Sorry, can you say that one more time? So if you're in a Starbucks and you use your iPhone as a hotspot, how can you make that more secure?
I guess the question, we'll make it a two-part question here. The first part is that the person asked is it secure, number one? And then I guess the second question would be is there a way to make it more secure? So kind of a two-parter.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, that is a really good question. So in terms of your hotspot is as secure as your regular iPhone internet service provider, right? But what you can do is, if you're connecting to your hotspot, you can make a secure password so no one else can use it. Just like Wi-Fi, like if you make your hotspot open to everyone, you have no idea what people are doing with it, right? So put a secure password in there. Make it 12 characters with uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a symbol, and you're making that hotspot secure. In terms of traffic, again, use that dual authentication via VPN. Once you have that hotspot connected to your client, it's just like any other type of internet, any other type of Wi-Fi. So make sure you do both. Make sure that you secure with a password and then use a VPN afterwards.
Awesome. Great advice. That's perfect. I think those are all the questions that we have here. So I want to take this opportunity to first, Austin, thank you for taking the time out of your day to present this. Again, I love these tips. I think they're just awesome, and I think they make great sense in terms of giving people the opportunity to mitigate their overall risk. Because again, you can't eradicate it completely, but you can certainly mitigate it to the best of your ability for sure. So, Austin, thank you. Thank you, everybody who took the time out of their day to jump on here. Again, I'll be sending out an email with a copy of the presentation as well as a link to review the recording. So if you want to rewatch it, or if you want to pass it on to a colleague or a friend, or anyone that you might want to pass it on to, you're more than welcome to do that. If you guys have any questions, Austin's email address will be in there. You guys probably have my email address as well. So feel free to reach out to us. But again, thank you everybody for your time, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.